Well, watching all of that in person was the CBC's Stephen D'Souza. He was in amongst that crowd, and I spoke to him about the reaction beginning when the white smoke began to rise.
Well, there was a huge cheer in the crowd at first, especially when they realized the smoke itself was white, and then everybody began rushing into an already packed square. It was a cold and rainy day today in Rome, and people had already packed into the square braving the weather. But as soon as that white smoke came, then people began to rush in even more. Ordinary Romans, tourists, people on bicycles. I even saw some nuns running to get a good vantage point to wait for the announcement of the new pope. And it was quite an amazing atmosphere to see people so excited in anticipation, talking amongst themselves, wondering who that next pope would be. And then when the announcement itself was actually made, there was a huge cry that went out amongst the crowd, a mixture of joy, elation, and then some surprise, because a lot of people didn't really know Cardinal Bergoglio as a name, as one of the papabile, one of the people who was considered the top contender. So when his name was first announced, people looked around to each other asking, who is this, an Argentinian? And of course there were some Argentinians in the crowd. We'd seen their flags waving all day, and so they were already singing and dancing for joy. So it was quite a momentous occasion to be there to see it all unfold.
And quite something for you to be in the middle of that and see it all unfold. Tell us more about some of the things that were notable to you being in and amongst the crowd.
Well, perhaps the most notable thing, of course, being in this age of social media is just how connected everyone is. And of course, there was a connection of being in the square, and so many people were on their cell phones calling home to tell them what was going on. But the best moment for me, I thought, was one point where just as Cardinal Bergoglio, now Pope Francis, was walking out onto the balcony, everyone was holding up their phones, and all of the screens that were being held up created this just sea of light. And I was towards the back of the square, so to be able to see that unfold in front of me, it was just truly an amazing thing to see. And so the thousands of people who were there will now all have these memories and these videos to cherish. And unfortunately, I don't think anyone was able to actually tweet or send any messages out, because with so many people using their phones at that point, it was virtually impossible to get a signal in the square at that time. But it was quite an amazing moment. And then there was still a bit of tension, though, because as Cardinal Bergoglio came out and began to address the crowd, there was a hush as people were waiting to hear what his first words would be. And when he said "Buonasera," it was just such a simple greeting and really indicative of the humble person that he is, that really eased a lot of the tension in the crowd, and people laughed and said "Buonasera" back to him, and people started chanting "Francesco, Francesco" in the crowd. And then when he made a bit of a joke saying that his cardinal brothers had gone to the ends of the earth to find him, of course being the first South American pope, that again set the crowd at ease. And he also bridged that with a bit of solemnity, asking for them to pray for him as well as to pray for Pope Benedict, and then they said the Lord's Prayer. So this truly ran the gamut of emotions, from a mix of celebration and joy to solemnity as well. I saw many people saying prayers and even a few tears in their eyes, just overcome with the emotion of the moment. So truly a magical moment to be there for the people in the crowd as well, I'm sure, for the people watching at home.
Well, and that's the thing, even if people couldn't tweet out there, tens of millions of people, maybe more around the world, were watching the old-fashioned way, live on television, as I was here in the newsroom in Vancouver. One last thing, for all that magic and all the joy that we saw on the television screen, what was it like after the Pope left the balcony, after the events of the evening were over? What was it like in the crowd then?
At that point in the crowd, there was a lot of discussions amongst people asking, so what comes next? You know, where does he go from here? And still many people wanting to know more about Pope Francis, but also just a sense of rest and relief, I guess, that now the conclave is done. Now people can get back to the business of the church and getting back to solving some of the issues that the church really needs to address, because that's really been the discussion here in the streets, is what issues will this next pope address first. And now, of course, many people are planning to be in Rome and at the Vatican for his first Mass and thinking about all the events coming forward. So even though this event is done, people are looking forward to what comes next now, and people even now still in the square enjoying what's taken place and really just letting it all settle in.
The CBC's Stephen D'Souza from Vatican City tonight. Well,